기능 문양을 만들 수가 있는 거예요. 이거는 지금 우리나라에서 나는 전복 껍질 가지고 만든 건데 떡자개라고도 하고 판자개라고 해요. 이걸 잘라가 만든 게 주름지 이런 식으로 만드는 거예요.
다시 그 플로리다 가면 친구들한테 선물 주려고 만든 건데 되게 좋아할 것 같아요.
오늘 이렇게 설명을 들으면서 통영이 정확히 어떠한 역사적인 유래를 가지고 이렇게 만들어졌는지 또 통영에 대한 또 자부심을 많이 느낄 수 있었던 유익한 시간이었습니다.
first debate over the weekend, Hill.
The economy is expected to expand 2.5% this year.
Boosting Korea's ties with its global partners on the sidelines of the status UN summit. A massive drone attack on Ukraine overnight on Monday and Tuesday.
Arirang.
In our headlines on this Thursday, September 11th, here in South Korea. President Jae-myung sits down with members of the local and foreign media earlier today to share his thoughts on a wide range of matters covering the economic and diplomatic arenas. And at the National Assembly, the ruling Democratic Party unilaterally passes revisions to the special probes into the martial law declaration by the former president, allegations against his wife, and the death of a Marine during flood relief operations in 2023. Meanwhile, the hundreds of South Korean workers, including engineers and skilled technicians, detained in the U.S. are scheduled to return home on Friday, local time. We start with team coverage of the press availability session that took place earlier on this Thursday to mark President Lee Jae-myung's first 100 days at the top office. First, our presidential office correspondent Song Yoo-jin covers his remarks with regard to the economy and efforts to revive it.
Marking 100 days in office, President Lee Jae-myung said reviving South Korea's domestic economy has been his most urgent task.
장기간 이어진 내수 침체 때문에 허약해질 대로 허약해진 우리 경제에 긴급하게 심폐소생술을 시행해야 했습니다.
Lee pointed to his administration's supplementary budget and voucher-style cash handouts, noting signs of improvement such as consumer sentiment at a 7-year high and the Kospi hitting record levels. To sustain that momentum, he says the country must transform its economic ecosystem, shifting away from an over-reliance on real estate speculation toward other investments such as stocks.
수요를 실수요자 중심으로 바꾸고 이게 투기적 또는 투자 유인으로 부동산을 취득하는 일을 최소화시킬 필요가 있는데 그러려면 끊임없이 반복적으로 대책을 내놓을 수밖에 없죠.
So far, his administration has unveiled 2 rounds of real estate measures, the latest just last Sunday, tightening mortgage rules while expanding housing supply. Lee also pledged to support the stock market's growth by reducing political and security risks and boosting high-tech investment through a proactive fiscal policy. Addressing concerns that such spending could swell the national debt, he argued that investing in promising sectors would boost national income and, in turn, improve the country's debt-to-GDP ratio. On the controversial issue of the government's plan to lower the capital gains tax threshold for large shareholders, the president signaled flexibility.
야당도 요구하고 또 여당도 또 그냥 놔두면 좋겠다는 의견이고 저한테 메시지도 막 많이 오고 그런 걸 봐서는 굳이 50억을 10억으로 내리자 반드시 그렇게 해야 되겠다 그렇게 생각하지는 않습니다.
President Lee reaffirmed that such progress will only be possible through unity and communication across party lines, a message he has consistently emphasized since taking office. President Lee says the remaining 4 years and 9 months of his term will be a time of growth and progress through governance rooted in unity. It remains to be seen how his administration will steer the country toward recovery and a new leap forward. Song Yoo-jin, Arirang News.
Also, during that press conference, the president shared concerns about future investment in the U.S. by South Korean businesses, given the recent detention of hundreds of South Korean workers by U.S. federal agents. Here's our correspondent, Yoon Jung-min.
When asked whether the recent controversial raid at a Hyundai factory in Georgia would affect future Korean investments in the U.S., President Lee Jae-myung responded,
기업들 입장에서는 미국의 현지 공장을 설립한다는 게 이거 앞으로 온갖 불이익을 주거나 아니면 어려워질 텐데 이거 해야 되나? 이런 고민을 안 할 수가 없겠죠.
President Lee said this at a news conference commemorating his first 100 days in office, explaining why their release, initially planned for Wednesday, was delayed. He noted that improving visa regulations is in the works with the U.S., such as issuing visas related to U.S. investment, securing certain quotas, or creating a new type of visa. As for ongoing follow-up trade talks with Washington, after reaching a framework trade deal in July to lower the Trump administration's sweeping tariffs, the South Korean leader said he will never make a decision that goes against the national interests. He added that on the surface, negotiations may seem unreasonable and irrational, but will be concluded in a reasonable way. On North Korea, President Lee noted that cross-border ties remain frosty, but his efforts for peace and dialogue will continue in the interest of the nation.
북미 대화가 열리는 게 한반도 평화와 안정에 도움된다. 미국의 대통령 트럼프라는 사람의 특성이 또 한반도 평화 안정 확보에 더 도움이 된다.
The topic topped the agenda last month when the two leaders met at the Oval Office, as Lee asked Trump to play the role of a peacemaker while he plays a pacemaker. On relations with Japan, President Lee noted he will take the two-track approach when it comes to disputes and cooperation, adding that such a stance will continue despite a leadership change in Japan, as Japan's Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba is soon to step down.
The first 100 days in office have been often seen as a yardstick to measure the accomplishments of presidents in their early days. Eyes are on how President Lee's pragmatic diplomacy will materialize for the rest of his 5-year term. Yoon Jung-min, Arirang News.
South Korean workers earlier detained by U.S. federal agents are scheduled to soon board the charter flight back home. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young is standing by live on the line with the latest from the Foreign Ministry here. Soo-young, it's good to have you on. So the workers I hear are on their way to Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport. Do tell us more.
Sure, Sonny. The released Koreans boarded buses and left the Georgia detention facility at around 2 a.m. on Thursday local time. That was around 3 p.m. here in Seoul about 2 hours ago, according to the Foreign Ministry in Seoul. They headed straight to the airport with their bags packed for them, so all ready to go. And 316 Koreans in total will be proceeding with their voluntary departure from the United States as negotiated by Seoul and Washington. As the two governments have not specified their individual visa status nor the legality of their stay in the U.S., it seems that they've avoided gaining an immigration violation record or any disadvantages should they later want to re-enter the United States. One person is reportedly staying behind as they have a permanent residency in the country. A total of 330 passengers will board the chartered flight, including 10 Chinese, 3 Japanese and 1 Indonesian national who are also detained in the same raid.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Soo-young, I understand we now also know why the planned departure for Wednesday was delayed. Do fill us in.
Sure. So Seoul officials say that the Wednesday departure plan was paused by none other than U.S. President Donald Trump. He reportedly called for ways to allow Korean workers to stay on that factory. He also objected to the Koreans being handcuffed by the immigration authorities. Regarding the mass arrest, the President and the White House have commented on the value of foreign investment in America, especially in the semiconductor and battery sectors, emphasizing the need to hire and train American workers, of course, but also acknowledging the need for skilled foreign workers in the initial stages. However, Seoul decided to proceed with the voluntary departure first and then perhaps re-entry later. And an official told me that this could be seen as a move that demonstrates South Korea's respect for American law.
Right, and before you go, do tell us about the talks between Foreign Minister Cho Hyun and his U.S. counterpart Marco Rubio. Soo-young.
Yes, according to our foreign ministry, the two officials met on Wednesday at the White House. The two sides confirmed the arrangement for the detainees' voluntary departure, with Foreign Minister Jong-un suggesting the creation of a working group on visa-related issues.
The visa-related working group was discussed at the Korea-U.S. Foreign Ministers meeting, and consultations will continue at the working level going forward. As a matter of principle, we believe the United States has also agreed.
Well, we can assume that Seoul will press for new visa tracks to accommodate South Korean companies' needs to set up their operations in the United States. Compared to America's other trade partners, such as Canada, Mexico, Australia, and Singapore, Seoul has no dedicated visa programs for professionals. So while companies like Hyundai, LG, Samsung SK, and POSCO are investing billions into U.S. plants, they have challenging timelines for setting up appropriate facilities and staffing them with skilled workers. Without viable visa options, they were basically stuck, and that's what seems to have led to this incident. Workers entering on short-term visas to help set up operations before ultimately leaving the United States. So with this crisis, it seems that the two allies are trying to create the opportunity to improve bilateral pathways for better economic cooperation going forward.
Right, I see. All right, Seong, as always, thank you very much for that quick update. We greatly appreciate it. Meanwhile, at the National Assembly, a fierce confrontation between lawmakers across the aisle as the ruling party unilaterally passes its version of the revised bills on special probes into the previous administration. I have our political correspondent Shin Ha-young standing by on the line with details. Ha-young, welcome. Do start by walking us through this latest standoff.
Sure, Sunny. Despite bipartisan agreement, the ruling party today unilaterally passed revisions to the special counsel investigations into former President Yoon Suk-yeol's martial law declaration, allegations against former First Lady Kim Gun-hee, and the death of a Marine during flood relief operations in 2023. And under the bills, special investigations into the martial law attempt and the former First Lady could be extended from 150 to 180 days, while the probe into the Marine's death could be prolonged from 120 to 150 days. And now this comes a day after the floor leaders of the ruling Democratic Party and main opposition People Power Party agreed to keep the three special counsel investigations at their current durations and struck a compromise on staffing, allowing each team up to 10 additional personnel. However, on Thursday morning, the DP declared the negotiations had collapsed, explaining that there had been backlash within the party and that the PPP rejected its offer to resume talks. Take a listen.
I couldn't accept it. And since it went against the party leadership's position, I immediately ordered renegotiations. I was also quite surprised by what happened yesterday.
The PPP, which boycotted the vote, criticized the breakdown of the agreement, saying the DP will be responsible for any further disruptions in the National Assembly. Take a listen.
The original special counsel bill from the DP included many problematic provisions, such as unlimited investigation extensions and an expanded scope. After our party raised objections, a difficult compromise was reached. However, on President Lee Jae-myung's 100th day in office, the DP broke that agreement.
Ha-young, during today's session, I hear the Parliament also voted in favor of a PPP lawmaker's arrest.
You're right, Sunny. The National Assembly passed a motion for the arrest of PPP lawmaker Kwon Song-dong with 173 for, 1 against, 1 abstention, and 2 invalid votes amid a PPP boycott. And last month, a special counsel team filed for an arrest warrant against Kwon for allegedly receiving illegal political funds from a former Unification Church official in 2022. And by law, sitting lawmakers are immune from arrest while the Assembly is in session. And for them to be arrested, the Assembly must consent to it. And over half of registered lawmakers must be present for voting, and of those, the majority must vote in favor. That's all for this hour. Sunny.
All right, Hayoung, thank you for that coverage. In other news, that North Korea seems to have strengthened the status of Kim Jong-un's daughter, Kim Ju-ae, as his potential successor. Now, this is according to the National Intelligence Service during a closed-door parliamentary briefing on this Thursday, highlighting her presence during her father's high-profile visit to Beijing last week to partake in China's Victory Day parade. The South Korea spy agency also asserted that Kim Jong-un does not appear to have any major health issue, while making note of North Korea's extensive efforts to protect both Kim and his daughter's biometric data. Poland has called for a meeting of NATO's main decision-making body to discuss Russia's drone incursion into Polish airspace earlier this week. Now, Russia's defense ministry, for its part, has claimed it had no plan to hit any target in Poland. But NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte pointed out that regardless of Russia's lack of any such intention, the drone invasion was reckless. Poland scrambled its defense mechanism in response to more than a dozen airspace breaches on Tuesday night and Wednesday morning. It has also requested an emergency meeting of the UN Security Council for Friday. An American political activist was shot and killed during an event on an American college campus, reigniting rampant fears about political violence in the U.S. Our Lee Seung-jae reports.
Conservative activist Charlie Kirk, a close ally of U.S. President Donald Trump, was shot and killed on Wednesday during a campus event in Utah. FBI Director Kash Patel took to social media in the hours after the shooting to say a suspect was in custody, following the release of another suspect who officials say was not the accurate person of interest. Trump confirmed Kirk's death on his Truth Social platform, calling him great and even legendary. The shooting took place at Utah Valley University, where Kirk was speaking under a white tent as part of a debate hosted by his nonprofit. Videos posted to social media show him addressing questions about gun violence when a single gunshot rang out. The 31-year-old clutched his neck as blood poured from the wound, sending shocked audience members screaming and running for cover.
And then as the guy said shooting or shooters or something like that, you just hear the gunshot and I'm sorry, you just see his neck just open up and there's just so much blood that just came out. It was horrible.
One person was briefly taken into custody, but later determined not to be involved with officials, saying the person was not the accurate person of interest. Kirk had been a prominent supporter of President Trump and frequently toured at college campuses, engaging in political debates with students. Wednesday's event was the first stop in a 14-city America comeback tour. He was the co-founder and CEO of Turning Point USA, a conservative youth organization he launched in 2012, aged 18. Kirk's death marked a shocking end to a career built on mobilizing youth for conservative politics, and adds to growing concerns about the escalating threat of politically motivated violence nationwide. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Back on the local front, President Lee Jae-myung has ordered a thorough investigation into two separate explosions that occurred during military training, one in Paju City and the other on Jeju-do Island. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has details.
10 soldiers were injured in an explosion at an army artillery unit in the northwestern city of Paju on Wednesday. According to the army, the incident took place at around 3:20 p.m., involving 12 soldiers participating in an artillery exercise using practice shells. The practice ammunition that was being used reportedly detonated during a training drill in a K-9 self-propelled howitzer. 10 of the soldiers were injured in the explosion and are currently being treated at the Armed Forces Capital Hospital.
6 of the injured are receiving intensive care for burns in the ICU, while the remaining 4 are being treated in general wards. The Army will provide the best possible specialized medical support to ensure full treatment and recovery of the soldiers.
Military police and the Army are currently investigating the exact cause of the accident, including whether there was a defect in the training rounds. On the same day, a training landmine detonator exploded at an Air Force base on Jeju-do Island. 6 reservists and 1 instructor incurred minor injuries and were discharged after being treated at a nearby hospital. In response to the explosions during training, President Lee Jae-myung called for the military on Thursday to conduct a thorough investigation into the cause of the incidents and prepare preventive measures to ensure they do not happen again using social media. Saying the state has a duty to take responsibility in treating injured soldiers and caring for their families, he added that the government will ensure the injured soldiers receive the best possible medical treatment. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, curtains went up on this year's K-Beauty Expo today, and our economic correspondent Kim Do-yeon was there to cover the hype and more. To take a look.
For an industry where appearances are everything, this year's K-Beauty Expo Korea is putting its best face forward. It opened its doors on Thursday with the 17th annual event, 30% larger than last year, hosting over 500 companies from 12 nations. K-Beauty brought in over $10 billion in exports last year. And at this expo, it is showing its diversity. It's not just lotion and sunblock at the booths. From hair products to skin healing devices, companies are showing their latest products to potential clients, with some deals offering up to 80% off. Here at the expo, you can even get your skin analyzed instantly with a 3D image generated. Here, you can see that I have freckles and need to start using sunblock. But at the heart of this event is connecting businesses. State-run trade agency KOTRA has organized meetings with 166 hand-picked international buyers, with around 1,000 one-on-one meetings like this set up.
Every year, the demand is so high. When we send out notices to attract buyers, we get many inquiries, and the countries are becoming more varied. We are receiving so many applications that it's almost impossible to keep up.
That confidence is especially strong in the U.S. market. Last year, South Korea surpassed France as the top cosmetic exporter to the United States, attracting buyers like Duane, who runs a spa in Detroit, Michigan. He started using and selling K-Beauty products just last year. Now, he's got 20 brands in his store.
If a client can purchase 3 pieces of skincare for the price of 1 U.S. brand, this is the same results. Or better, honestly. We are finding that they're hungry for the information.
One new hurdle, though, the 15% tariff.
It's not going to deter me from purchasing because the price is already very good.
And as the booths at the expo suggest, the K-beauty industry's growth wasn't driven by big companies. It is smaller companies that are selling on e-commerce overseas, such as Amazon. For this, Amazon Ads is a global sponsor for the first time. To help brands navigate the digital market, the expo is also hosting seminars like the K-Beauty Insight Concert, offering strategies on market trends and using AI for a competitive edge. The expo runs until Saturday. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
These days, the temperature differences between daily highs and lows have widened. The temperature started below 20 degrees Celsius this morning, with a temperature of 19.9 degrees in Seoul. However, the temperatures rose sharply in the hot sun, and Seoul rose to 32 degrees during the day. Tomorrow and Saturday, rain is expected all over the country. Heavy rain will be concentrated, especially in the central regions. More than 120 millimeters will fall in southern Gyeonggi-do province, inland and mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province, and Chungcheongnam-do province. Friday morning will start at 21 degrees in Seoul, Daejeon, Gwangju, and Gyeongju. Highs will rise up to only below 30 degrees in most parts of the country. The late heat in the western region will also fade as rain falls across the country on Friday and Saturday. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. As always, thank you for watching.
Hoping that all the meals here serve as a foundation of its practices. The process of making a meal requires deep interconnectedness. And being thankful for the effort is the first step forward. Tastes rendered by time, scented by nature, temple food is made with the wisdom of its practitioners, and it's a peaceful meal to fill your heart. Gratitude is the core of the practice. The refrain from the 5 pungent ingredients supports mental clarity and mindfulness. Refraining from taking the life of any living being, practicing to cherish all life. Satisfying your hunger and emptying your mind. Food can nourish the body and cultivate awareness. Keeping gratitude and relationships in mind, finding peace within yourself. Temple food, seeking to calm and clear the mind.
President Lee Jae-myung holds a press conference earlier on this Thursday, that is September 11th, to mark his first 100 days at the top office, taking questions from members of the local as well as foreign media. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Thursday, September 11th here in Seoul. I'm Min Sun-hee. Today we mark the first 100 days of the Lee Jae-myung administration, and in light of this occasion, the President sat down with the press to share his thoughts on the economy, diplomacy and culture. For more on this, I have freelance journalist Rafael Rashid here in the studio. Rafael, it's great to have you here.
Great to be back.
I also have Thomas Maresca with the American news agency UPI with us as well. Thomas, welcome back.
Thanks, great to be here.
So, Rafael, you were there at the press conference with President Lee Jae-myung. Let's start with his remarks with regard to the economy.
Yeah, President Lee framed his first 100 days in power as primarily a period of recovery and normalization, with economic recovery as taking the absolute priority. He described Korea's economy as having been weakened recently due to extreme degree of prolonged domestic demand stagnation, requiring something that he called emergency CPR. The President also highlighted several concrete achievements over the past 100 days or so. So he said that consumer sentiment had recovered to its highest point in 7 years, 7 months, helped by swift implementation of the supplementary budget, which we all know resulted in the consumption vouchers that were distributed to the entire population, to the public. He noted that various economic indicators are now turning upward in a positive direction, pointing to the Kospi index, which had, he said, had surpassed, well, it did surpass 3,300 points to reach record high levels, at least before the press conference. And he emphasized that the financial markets and the stock market were showing rapid signs of recovery. So looking forward, the President outlined an ambitious vision for what he called genuine growth through building an innovative economy that leads the world alongside growth for everyone, basically ensuring that the fruits of economic expansion are shared by all citizens.
Rafael, what were some of your takeaways from his remarks?
Yeah, I think I'd say my takeaways are that I think Lee is positioning himself as a president who rescued or is rescuing Korea from economic crisis through immediate intervention. The emphasis on consumption vouchers and stimulus measures suggests that his administration views domestic consumption as a key driver of recovery. The focus on record-breaking market performance also proves or kind of serves his political narrative that his presidency has restored confidence. However, the growth for everyone rhetoric that I just mentioned indicates awareness that any recovery must be felt broadly to be basically politically sustainable. So I think his political messaging or his economic messaging blends kind of crisis management with optimism, portraying that the worst times are over for Korea and promising transformation and growth going ahead.
Right, and for the sake of context, Thomas, what can you tell us about the current state of the Korean economy, and what are the challenges here at home and abroad?
Right, so I think you might characterize the economy in a kind of period of like a cautious recovery or maybe delicate sort of recovery. We have seen growth rebounding this past quarter, the second quarter of the year. The economy grew 0.7%, but that was after 4 quarters in a row of being kind of no growth or even negative. Bank of Korea and IMF is projecting like 0.8% growth for the rest of this year. And then I saw some figures from Bloomberg, a kind of roundup of projections for 1.8% next year and 2% in 2027. So, not explosive growth, but growth nonetheless, and certainly better than where we were. As Rafael mentioned, there's some indicators that are quite positive, like the Kospi index being kind of on fire. I think it's the best performing market in the world this year, actually. at the same time, there are a lot of uncertainties, and there's certainly domestic and international potential headwinds. I'm not an economist, but these are things that I've seen pointed out. We have seen consumer stimulus rebounding this year, partly by the result of the supplemental budget, but there's already, I think, some signs that it's weakening a bit. I mean, there's also been a big tech and AI investment that's helping sort of stimulate the economy, and that, I think AI remains a question mark, sort of, whether it's going to pan out and globally, I think in the U.S. as well, there's a sort of some questions arising whether we're seeing a bit of a bubble with that. So that's, an area maybe to keep an eye on. External factors, I think, are just a huge thing that are they really are in such an unpredictable state. I mean, we've seen South Korea did strike this tariff and trade deal with the U.S. not so long ago that, seemed relatively favorable and, compared to some other countries. And, South Korea does have some advantages in its relationship with the U.S. in certain fields like shipbuilding and, semiconductors remain important. So you would think it's well positioned. South Korea may be well positioned to kind of weather this uncertainty, but then, suddenly we've seen this, deportation situation in the Georgia Hyundai plant, which, kind of just is such a sort of a shocking and unexpected twist in this, relationship. And, Korea had been investing quite a bit in the U.S., so that sort of throws the balance off. And I think just even globally, we still really haven't felt the impact of tariffs and the whole sort of uncertainty around, the future. And Korea, as such an export-driven economy, clearly is exposed to that. So, it's a sort of a cop-out to say, like, we'll see, but I think we are in such a period when it's so hard to accurately sort of assess the future. But, that said, for now, we are on this sort of cautious recovery path, I think.
Right, and keeping in mind what Thomas has just said, Raphael, where do trade talks between Seoul and Washington currently stand?
Yeah, the trade talks between the two sides have reached a kind of critical deadlock, with the negotiations stalled over the massive $350 billion investment fund that basically sits at the heart of their kind of bilateral agreement. Even the presidential policy secretary, Kim Yong-bom, has been, I guess, blunt about this situation, stating that we are, or at least they are, at an impasse right now. The core problem centers on foreign exchange concerns. Seoul argues that it cannot accept the same terms as Japan's $550 billion deal because Korea's economic fundamentals are essentially entirely different. They're not the same, they say. The Korean won lacks the international currency status of the Japanese yen. Korea's foreign exchange reserves are 3 times smaller than Japan's, and the $350 billion investment vastly exceeds Korea's state-run policy banks that they can procure annually, basically, which is said to be around $20 to $30 billion. There's also friction when it comes to the profit-sharing arrangement. So the U.S. Commerce Secretary, his assertion that 90% of profits from Korea's investment in the U.S. would go to American people. This has angered Seoul officials a bit, and they basically view these terms as unacceptable. And despite, I would say, reaching a framework agreement in July that reduced the tariffs that we saw from 25% to 15%, the two sides still lack this kind of fundamental, formal documentation. Even the industry minister, I believe, is traveling to Washington. I think he departed this morning for emergency talks, marking, again, an escalation in this kind of diplomatic effort to get things running and get things running, because working level the negotiations have basically yielded minimal progress for the time being. President Lee this morning at the press conference made his negotiating position clear. He said that I will absolutely not make decisions that go against South Korea's national interests, and I will not engage in any negotiations that go beyond rationality and fairness. So I think this reflects his broader stance that Korea won't be pressured into any unfavorable agreements simply for the sake of reaching a deal.
Right, indeed. Thomas, the president also covered politics and foreign affairs in his press conference earlier today. Could you walk us through his thoughts?
Yes, well, it was he covered quite a bit. I mean, it was a very lengthy press conference, and a lot of the domestic political issues, I think he got very much in the weeds that I think maybe the foreign press doesn't quite, fully absorb or get too in detail with generally in our coverage. But, I mean, his overall stance politically, I mean, he kind of repeated his, his main point, since the start of his administration that, he aims to achieve national unity, end the political divide, and he sort of discussed his first 100 days as a kind of a period of recovery and normalization. He did address a lot of questions, and topics were about kind of contentious issues like the, special prosecutor reform, prosecutorial reform, special investigations, media law, inheritance taxes, and I won't go too in depth on it, but he basically kind of tried to defend each case, I mean, certainly in terms of investigating the, martial law period, he was making a case that it was sort of the good of the people and not a politically motivated investigation. On the foreign policy front, I mean, he pretty much keyed on Japan, North Korea, and U.S. as his three main topics. I mean, with Japan, he actually said that Korea-Japan relationships are as difficult as relations with North Korea. And he talked about the, the history and the territorial disputes with Japan, and didn't, he said he wouldn't ignore those topics, but, wanted to just approach future-oriented issues, social, economic, private exchanges separately. And that's kind of where he's been from the start. Again, with this, he's really emphasized a kind of a pragmatism in his foreign policy. He kind of commented on the resignation of the Japanese Prime Minister, Ishiba, and said that, acknowledged that could perhaps, add a new wrinkle to the relationship, but he said he plans to maintain the existing principles that, he met with Ishiba recently. He acknowledged North Korea. His attitude as remains cold. He acknowledged these outreach efforts that his administration has made, but North Korea really has not responded at all. But he said, we're consistently continuing to make efforts, and he sort of stressed the importance of coordination with the U.S. I mean, he really gave kind of Washington the driver's seat role in whatever may happen as far as, future negotiations with North Korea, which, I don't think is incorrect, saying that Pyongyang kind of regards Washington as the main, threat / potential partner. I mean, that's the way it's been for quite a while. So, he said that North Korea would kind of play the role of like a pacemaker or pace setter in helping to set up if there's a summit with the U.S. So he was kind of giving the U.S. the sort of primary role in maybe what would happen in the next stage of any kind of negotiation with North Korea. But said, he would continue, his administration would continue just trying to create these efforts at keeping the peace, and maybe even a small opening will emerge. So he's been doing all these, lowering the temperature moves, like turning off the loudspeakers. And then, he spent time on the U.S. I think this is the big question, and maybe the takeaway that a lot of international media covered was his comments about this immigration raid at the Hyundai factory, and, mentioning that it would have probably, a negative impact on Korean investment unless there's some kind of, perhaps negotiation and changing the visa situation to avoid these. But he expressed puzzlement, bewilderment at such a thing. he also announced the return of the detainees. He was the one who announced the flight coming back. So, there's not really much way to, a good way to spin how shocking this situation was. But I think he addressed it relatively forthrightly.
You're right. I was actually going to ask you about your takeaway from that press conference with regard to his thoughts on foreign affairs and politics, but you already covered that. So I'm going to give this next question to Raphael then. How do you evaluate President Lee Jae-myung's foreign policy thus far, Raphael?
Yeah, I guess bouncing off what Thomas has said, I think his foreign policy has represented a significant recalibration, at least compared to his predecessor's approach. And there's been a bit of a mix of I would say, early small achievements. So as Thomas was talking about, when we look at Japan, for instance, I do think there's been a relative breakthrough, especially by making Tokyo his first bilateral visit. Breaking 6 decades of protocol, and Lee also secured this first joint statement between the two countries in 17 years. So I don't think we can say that that's not as, I think it's quite significant. And this wasn't just symbolism. The agreement on, there was hydrogen, artificial intelligence, cooperation, joint demographic solutions addressing real challenges that the two countries face. I think the personal chemistry that he had with, I guess now former Prime Minister Ishiba was noticeable. But I guess we'll have to see now that he has resigned. But I think today he also, in his press conference, mentioned that, regardless of whoever becomes the next leader, he will, it seems, still try to focus on maintaining this relationship. And definitely the presidential office has made that clear. It doesn't matter who will come in power. But I think the standout success, despite all the headlines and the noise, the standout has been his relationship management with Trump's America. Lee has successfully navigated what many feared would be a kind of disastrous mismatch when they met the other day at the White House, and the $350 billion trade framework, despite, of course, the current implementation challenges. I think it does represent a major diplomatic achievement in itself that at least eliminated the immediate threat, the tariff threats, and I guess positioned Korea as a key partner for American industrial policy. That said, Lee's foreign policy, I think, does still face, of course, some limitations. I don't think it's going to be an easy ride going ahead. For example, China, despite sending envoys and kind of doing this kind of diplomatic outreach, the substantive progress remains elusive for the time being, I think. Of course, we saw the Speaker of the National Assembly, Jong-un, going to Beijing the other day, so that was a positive sign. But Beijing's expectations for a major policy shift towards China, I think, hasn't materialized yet. Of course, we are only within 100 days, so he has a bit more time. But then we'll have Washington's pressure for alliance, burden sharing, and there will also be other factors. And again, coming back to what Thomas was talking about when it comes to North Korean dimension, I think that this probably presents his greatest challenge, despite these kind of confidence-building measures, turning off the loudspeaker broadcasts and prohibiting the leaflets at the border. Pyongyang has remained, as President Lee said, cold, or giving the cold shoulder at the moment, quite unresponsive. So I guess looking ahead, the real tests will be, we'll see Trump's demands for expanded U.S. forces Korea strategic flexibility. That's been covered on this program many times. Potential defense spending increase to 3.8% of the GDP. And then again, the unresolved trade disagreements will, of course, challenge Lee's so-called balancing act, which has been, I think, successful for for the past 100 days, but it doesn't mean it'll be easy sailing going ahead. So overall, I think his early achievements, at least they provide a relatively solid foundation for the time being, but kind of preserving a space for autonomous decision-making, I think, will be his biggest challenge to come.
Right. And with regard to North Korea, Thomas, as both you and Raphael have mentioned, the new administration has taken tangible steps to seek to reduce tensions here on the Korean Peninsula. But North Korea, for its part, as Raphael just said, it's been unresponsive, cold, so to speak. What are your thoughts with regard to the Lee Jae-myung administration's approach to Pyongyang?
Well, I think it's, it fits into his kind of overall, just this strategic realism that I think is marking his approach to the presidency. It really is just an approach at this point. It's not really a plan or anything, and so, but it is obviously it's a contrast to his predecessor in terms of, moving from kind of hostility to, pacification, or trying to sort of lower the temperature, I guess you could say. I mean, there's been some criticism, is he being too conciliatory, saying, he mentioned during his, the Liberation Day speech, respecting kind of the North Korean system. But, I think at the same time, he really is not taking an ideological approach as much as I think most previous administrations kind of have in the past, either really holding unification up as the ideal, or kind of maintaining this more war stance against them. Whereas I think he's trying to, in a sense, it is more addressing the reality, I think, of the situation now in a way where it's kind of impossible to pretend as much of we can, I mean, his approach towards denuclearization, even he's kind of announced a plan that was, seen not as hardline of a complete, CVID, complete verifiable denuclearization. He talked about a 3-step plan: freezing, reducing, dismantling, and that's already something that's a bit different in the framework of how this is being talked about. And again, it may not sort of satisfy extremes on either side, but there certainly has been a call for sort of trying to have a reasonable or realistic approach to negotiations with North Korea. And even something like freezing their nuclear program at this point could be seen as a win. There's been some studies recently saying that in X number of years, like a decade or so, if North Korea keeps building nuclear weapons at the certain pace it has, they'll have a bigger arsenal than India, Pakistan, Israel. So, we're at a different place even than the first Trump administration about like what we can hope to get from North Korea. But at the same time, as you've mentioned, we've all talked about, North Korea has been totally unresponsive to any of these overtures so far. So I guess the other question, what would, get it beyond the sense of an approach or a stance, is like, what can you do to bring North Korea maybe to the table to even start discussing it? Obviously Washington seems like the kind of focal point to get this started, but at the same time, we've seen so much unpredictability from Washington in this administration. It's hard to necessarily count on that, but there has to, obviously it is only 100 days as well, but eventually there has to be some sort of framework or some outreach that's to North Korea to try and get them to respond.
Right. Well, pundits are hoping that the upcoming APEC will provide the opportunity for a dialogue with North Korea. We'll see if that happens this autumn. All right, Thomas, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much for your time and your thoughts.
Thank you.
Raphael, thank you very much for your insights.
Pleasure, as always.
That ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
이어온 우리의 지혜가 제천에서 다시 태어났어. 세대를 관통한 선조들의 건강 빅데이터. 빅데이터. 우리의 삶과 들에서 자란 천연물은 단순한 재료가 아니야. K-내추럴. 한국인의 정체성을 담은 바로 살아있는 역사지. 천년의 처방이 첨단 기술과 만나는 순간. 글로벌 천연물 시장의 중심 제천에서 2025년 9월 20일부터 10월 19일까지 천년의 지혜를 담은 미래를 만나봐.
Building a sustainable tomorrow. Connect, innovate, and prosper. Connecting goods to goods, region to region, people to people, generation to generation. Facilitating innovation for all, closing the digital divide. Building an inclusive technology ecosystem, promoting digital innovation by deepening dialogues on AI. Achieving shared prosperity, addressing global challenges. Energy transition, climate change, population decline, and pandemic responses. APEC-related events continuing in Seoul, the capital of the Republic of Korea, where diverse cultures blend. Jeju, the beautiful island, blessed with UNESCO Natural World Heritage Sites. Incheon, the vibrant international city, central hub, connecting Asia-Pacific